At the end of Chapter 5, the externalization of Gatsby's musical characteristic is once more exemplified, and this time it comes with a fatal result. At Gatsby's house, Fitzgerald describes how there was, quote, a man named Klipspringer who was there so often and so long that he became known as the boarder, and who serves as a sort of resident musician. When Daisy comes over after the meeting at Nick's house, Gatsby wakes Klipspringer up and has him play the piano for the evening. While Klipspringer is preparing to play, Nick describes how Gatsby, and then all this in quotes, flipped a switch. The gray windows disappeared as the house glowed full of light. In the music room, Gatsby turned on a solitary lamp beside the piano. He lit Daisy's cigarette from a trembling match and sat down with her on a couch far across the room, where there was no light save the gleaming floor, saving what the gleaming floor bounced in from the hall. When Klipspringer has played the Love Nest, when Klipspringer had played the Love Nest, he turned around on the bench and searched unhappily for Gatsby in the gloom. I'm all out of practice, you see. I told you I couldn't play. I told you I'm all out of practice. Don't talk so much, old sport, commanded Gatsby. Play. Again, Gatsby does not create any music for himself. An example cut from the paper, but trust me. He can only ask Klipspringer to play the piano for him. And moreover, his disconnection from the jazz age is so complete that he seems not to care whether or not his jazz pianist is any good. Further, while Gatsby was radiant earlier in the evening, now we read how he flipped a switch, turned on a lamp, and lit a cigarette, all of which only partially illuminate the gloomy music room. Fitzgerald deprives Gatsby of light in 3 consecutive sentences. Though the incompatibility between Daisy and Gatsby's musical characteristics will fully display themselves in Chapter 6, this incompatibility, their doomed romance, is here anticipated. That is, Gatsby loses the light of ambiguity as soon as he reasserts his unmusical character, and the situation itself, as seen in the gloomy half-lit atmosphere that surrounds them in the music room, instead assumes the ambiguous light. Fitzgerald has already decided Daisy's future, even though she herself has not.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you, all 3 of you, for such interesting papers and giving us so much to think about. So the next part of our program will include respondents asking questions generally about the novel to any of the 3 readers, or anybody else for that matter, and then perhaps some questions specific to some of the readers. Marvel and Molina, unfortunately, will have to leave in about 10 minutes. Her final exam was scheduled to overlap with part of this period. So perhaps we could start out that way. If anybody has anything specific to Marvelin's paper about the women in the Great Gatsby, maybe we can give her an opportunity to speak. Does anybody have anything that would suit Marvelin? Yes, Rachel, please.
Yeah. Okay, so I didn't mark it in the paper, but you talk about how Daisy was loyal to Tom because of the money that Tom has. But I was wondering, Gatsby's also got money. So what do you think the difference is between Tom and Gatsby in that regard?
Yeah, well, it comes from the old money, which is the new money, and Tom has old money, so Tom will always have money. And Gatsby, he has money now, but it won't be there forever. So I think it's
more of a reassurance.
Yeah, and she wants to be with the money and be in the higher class. That she'd rather just be safe and know that's always going to be there instead of worrying one day like, oh, it's not there.
You speak about Jordan and her dishonesty is a weakness, but dishonesty is something a lot of the characters in the book, especially Gatsby, grapple with. So how do you distinguish between the dishonesty that Jordan has and the dishonesty that Gatsby has?
Well, the dishonesty that Gatsby has, it's more like, how do you put it? He's doing it, I guess, for a better purpose. And as for Jordan, it could be seen as for a better purpose, but she's only trying to better herself, and rather than Gatsby, he's trying to better himself and Daisy.
You say that the women are weak, and going back to the money between Gatsby and Tom and who has money and who doesn't, do you think you could kind of turn this on its head and say the women aren't weak, but they're just using the men for the money? So in that manner, they're kind of smart by saying, I'm not going to do anything but sit around, and this guy's kind of going to be the breadwinner here? And so maybe they're not really as weak as they seem to be?
Yeah, it could be seen that way, and I agree. But I feel that they are weak in a sense because, as I said before, how Nick describes them as childish and playful, so they're not really yes, they are smart for like seeing it that way, but I feel like the things they do are just very weak.
So maybe that's all an act.
It could be, but I feel like they could have went in a different way with it. Because at this time era, they could have worked and they could have made their own money instead of relying on a man to get the money.
But in the 1920s, women didn't have very many options to make money.
Yes,
I
they
mean,
did.
they were just getting the right to vote, so it's the beginning of the suffrage movement.
Yeah, and it was the beginning for them to test their independence instead of relying on a man.
Okay, hold on. I have it here. I have a question for you. Okay, you say without the status of woman golfer, she would be the same as Daisy. But if you take away anyone's source of independence, they become dependent on someone else. Like, why do you see Daisy and Jordan as the same?
I see them as the same because of the fact that they both are very ambitious for something. As she was saying, how like, it could be a secret, like that's how they're powerful for the whole lie about pretending to be weak so they can save the money. But I feel like for Jordan and Daisy, it's like Daisy's, I guess, pretending to be in love with Tom, but she does use him, but not in a smart way. And I feel like for Jordan, what was your question? I lost my thought.
Like how, like because you were relating Jordan to Daisy because if she didn't have the status of woman golfer, she would be the same as Daisy, and like, but she is a woman golfer, so I was trying to see like where the similarity really lies.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I said that because I feel like once Nick came into the picture of Jordan, I feel like she still did have a wall built in front of her, but it was kind of slowly breaking down. And I feel like if she wasn't a golfer, a pro golfer, I feel like she would have to look for somebody to rely on, just as Daisy does. So I feel like she would just went to Daisy as to become like Daisy.
Did you see her as independent though, like
Jordan?
Yeah.
Sorta, because she did do this all by herself. Like, she did it herself, but she did cheat. So that's where her independence, did fail.
Did she lose her independence though, like with the cheating?
I believe so, yes. Just because, like, if that's the only way you could become, like, successful and empowered, and it's the only way by cheating, I feel like you kind of do lose your independence and your credibility as well.
But the reader doesn't know for sure that Jordan cheated, it's only a rumor. So then would an alternate interpretation be that she didn't cheat and people assume she's weak, so they say she's cheating?
It could be that because she is, a woman golfer and she's very successful for her, so that it could be not true. But I just feel like the fact that she doesn't, and how she doesn't like deny the accusations or really do much about it, I feel like it kind of like she's not really helping her case.
So thank you for standing up to all that intense questioning. Do you have anything else to say in your defense?
I feel like I got beat up.
We're so happy to hear your thoughts on all of that, Marvelina. But it's 20 after, so I just want to make sure you're not late for your exam.
Have a good test.
It's math, so it's not good.
So perhaps at this time we can kind of pull back a little bit and maybe ask more general questions that would allow Luke and Aviana and anyone else to respond. But that is not to say that if you have something specific to ask these two readers that you should, please by all means. So who would like to ask a question first?
Luke, you used the phrase light of ambiguity a lot, and I wasn't completely clear by what you meant by that phrase.
Alright, this is one of the things I footnoted earlier in the paper that I didn't read out, so I'll just read the footnote. I'm proceeding from the premise that light in The Great Gatsby is a deliberately ambiguous symbol, or perhaps even a symbol of ambiguity itself. The famous light at the end of the dock, for instance, could well be taken as both a symbol of hope and hopelessness simultaneously. That's sort of how I looked at light. I think very often reading this novel, a lot of people write about the use of light, and not just the famous green light, but you have light all over the place. And people look at that and I think they try and put a specific symbolic value on it, and I think I apologize if it sounds like sort of a literary theory cop-out, but it's a symbol of whatever you want it to be a symbol of. I think it's that just sort of ambiguous desire. It's because we don't know what Daisy is, which is sort of she's taken to be what the green light signifies. She's the thing at the end of the dock. But what is Daisy? The ambiguity surrounding Daisy is the same as the one surrounding Gatsby. We don't know who she is, as we don't know Gatsby. And so for that reason, I sort of just say, light. Anytime you get an image of light, it's a symbol of I don't know what this is. That's what I perceive it from anyways. The whole paper is contingent on that, so if you're not happy with that, you may have to take it.
That different people see different things in light, so that kind of light is a reflection of the person's character or state of mind? Is that the argument?
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely fair argument. I think, I mean, not even just different people, but every time you read the book, light may signify something different. I don't think it's a definite fixed symbol, like I don't know, like Lord of the Flies, the shell is hope. Like it's always that, that's what it means. But in this, I think the light, I mean, even light itself, it's sort of this ethereal thing in the air. You can't hold light. It's not a nice, tangible thing. And so the symbol reflects that. You can project yourself onto it.
When I was reading your paper, I was thinking that was a possibility with the music actually, and why Gatsby is unable to create music himself, as it's not all about his disconnection with Daisy, but it's about his lack of gentleness, in a sense. Do you feel like that's a possibility?
Yeah, another thing that came up in the paper and the stuff that was cut. I do mention Tom does have musical descriptions attached to him. We get his tenor voice, and there's this really interesting part where he's secretly kind of likened to an Italian tenor. And so there is musical imagery ascribed specifically to Tom, but not to Gatsby. And that's why I argue at the very end, that's why Tom and Daisy work. That's why in the beginning I call it a half-failed romance, because they do end up together, not happily, but they are together. And it's because of that, because even though they're sort of Tom, the very conservative Italian tenor, Daisy, jazz age femininity, those don't jive, but they are both musical. They have that at least, and Daisy and Gatsby don't have that. Gatsby's completely disconnected.
It's such an interesting thesis.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. Let's see. Okay. So Fitzgerald coined the phrase quintessential novel of the jazz age.
Specifically the jazz age.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Like how much of the Great Gatsby's success is because of the prevalence of jazz in the story, at a time where jazz was the bee's knees and the cat's pajamas. Do you think he used jazz to his benefit to sell a book, or was there an honest passion for it?
I don't think it's a question of passion or liking or hating jazz. I think it's just the fact that jazz is a thing. It's there. It's part of society. And it's so integral to society. The idea why I put in that he coined it, I think, is important because it's not the age of jazz, it's the jazz age. So it's not the age where people are listening to jazz. It's like with Daisy. Daisy, she's not like, with Coltrane, she's not playing jazz, but she is jazz. And that's the jazz age. It's the age that is jazz. And so for Fitzgerald to use it is just, as I argue, it's to make that connection between what is modern and the distinction between what is modern and what isn't. So jazz is everywhere, and Daisy's jazz, therefore Daisy is the modern jazz age woman. And then Tom, music's associated with him, but it's not jazz. So Tom is sort of this conservative, stuffy, non-jazz age, kind of old, rich, white guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so I don't think it has anything to do with selling copies. I think it's a very genuine artistic decision to use jazz in such a way.
If Daisy is jazz, either later in our discussion or maybe after the program, I'd like to hear what Myrtle is.
Okay. I will send you a copy of the essay.
Good, thank you. Erika, did you have a question for either speaker? Or just generally?
For Aviana, your essay is about how the reader perceives the story and is manipulated. And my question is, when you were reading the story, how were you manipulated and how did you perceive the story?
I honestly didn't see any biased views on it until I did more research on it and until I read other books that had different characters as narrators. So until I got a feel for different books or did more research on it, I did see it in that way, especially regarding Daisy, how she's seen as such a elegant charm, but we only see that through a male perspective, so it's not necessarily how everyone sees her. So I think it was until I did more research and read other views on it that I realized it.
I'd like to build upon that because I was kind of fascinated by your paper about Nick being an unreliable narrator because I counted on him so much and I was so disappointed to hear he's not reliable. But I posed two questions. Who would you say is a better first-person narrator if Nick is unreliable? But furthermore, and if you take first person, every single narrator is going to be unreliable. So is there really such thing as a reliable narrator? If every single person has a biased view, like let's say I had a bad experience as a child and I hate the color green, so I'm going to present green in a certain way that other narrators might not. So how can you really have a reliable narrator that's first person?
Well,